It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. We had everything before us. We had nothing before us. Prescient words by Charles Dickens for our time, or, as Ecclesiastes put it, a time for weeping, a time for laughing, a time for wailing, a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones, a time for gathering stones. Today is the birthday of the universe. Today, a day of gratitude for light and air, for prairies and mountains. Today, this day of exaltation, a day that recalls God's majesty and delivers us to the sacred palace of justice and compassion. Today, overflowing with the holiness that is the tenacity of our people. Holiness built with ancient stones and unforgotten wisdom, strong enough to endure dark orange skies, pandemic, and political chaos. On this day that God set aside for us, for you, I ask this simple and difficult thing. Have faith. Have faith. Have faith that this is not the end. Have faith that we, creatures formed in the image of the Holy One, might give birth to new worlds. Have faith that we, spiritual descendants of Abraham and Sarah, carry with us the wisdom that great-grandparents tucked carefully into worn-out hearts and worn-out suitcases for each of us to dust off at a time just like this. A time like this. Time. Rabbi Heschel taught us that Torah makes time sacred, not things or places. Its very ikar, its very essence, is time, this day, a day filled with hope for what might be. And you today, on your couch or in your backyard, in your finest clothes or in your finest pajamas, living in health or in illness, in love or in solitude, connecting with us on this day of sacred jubilation and profound grief. The promise of Rosh HaShanah is here for you, for us. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. A time of throwing stones, a time of gathering stones, a time of peace and a time of war, a time of love and a time of hate, a time of truah and a time of Shana Tova, Tikatevu. Yom Truah, a day of sacred blasts, announcing the new year, announcing our people's covenant with the creator of all that is. Rosh Hashanah is, after all, a day about God's power. Today, the culmination of the love affair between people Israel and God, a renewal of the vows made at a mountain in the Sinai desert. If there was ever a time for emunah, for faith, it's this time, this day, this year, a time to see holiness. Faith, the specifically Jewish kind, with its questions and doubts, and also its eternal love, is a faith of resistance. When we Jews bow down to the Holy One, it is a bow that is also a rebuke of corrupt power and evil. We only bend to goodness. To the wicked we steel ourselves. To the arrogant we are a stiff-necked people. When we bow down to the Holy One of old, we stand tall against forces that bring suffering and pain to our vulnerable world. Truah, we shout out, as Moses did in the face of a cruel and depraved Pharaoh. Like Esther in the face of a foolish and selfish king. This is not right. This is not the way things are supposed to be. You have your earthly position, but the prophets of Israel whisper in my ear, there is a force more powerful than you, a power of justice and love and holiness. And that is the monarch that we bow to. That is the source of goodness to which we submit. And we balance Truah, our shouting out to heaven that we strive to have faith in, with Shana Tova Tikatevu, a message for the future. A good year. All we want is a good year. A year in which we are written in a book of our best lived lives. A year of abundant ink for the scroll of what has not yet been, but may yet be. This requires something separate from holy anger and shouting out. Faith in the future. And maybe this is hard for you. Perhaps the idea of faith in the future, which is a kind of faith in God, feels difficult or irrational. Maybe your experience with faith has been an experience of unthinking, an experience of religious inflexibility or dogma. Consider this. When we wish one another a Shana Tova, a year of goodness, we are digging into the depths of Jewish history, into the richness of our tradition, knowing in the way that only we can, that the year ahead really can be good and sweet. A story from the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin. A few rabbis were sitting around, as they did, pondering the age-old question of when the world might end. Rav Nachman asks Rabbi Yitzchak, "Nu, have you heard when the Messiah will come?" Several rabbis then proceed to debate this critical question without seeming to arrive at any clear answer. Then Rabbi Zera, who is one of the more colorful of our ancestors, interjects. He implores his friends to stop trying to guess. The Messiah and the world to come, he reminds us, will only come when you stop searching for it. Rabbi Zera argues that the Messiah and the end of the world are sort of like your lost keys or love or fortune. Stop looking for them, because looking for them is not what makes these kinds of things show up. You find them when you let go. And in this short exchange, Rabbi Zera invites his friends, and by extension us, back to a place of faith. Stop thinking about the end, he urges them, even as the Jews of Babylon also faced their own existential questions. Live in this world, in this time, Rabbi Zera teaches us. Have faith in what it could be. Have faith in who you might be, in who we might be. When we look to one another and offer wishes for Shana Tova, for a good year, we are invoking our faith in the possibility of the goodness that the year could bring. I am asking you to find that faith and hold fast to it with the grit and determination of one who calls out for justice like a shofar, Announce the possibility of tova umituka, goodness and sweetness, with a blast that echoes off the hills of San Francisco, off of purple mountains in their majesty. Shout it up to the heavens. Friends, do not despair. We have many blessings and much strength. Be one who is like the time of Yom Teruah, a day of shouting out for a world that matches the loftiest visions of the prophets of Israel. And be one who has the courage to look to your loved ones, your neighbors, your city, your country, the whole world, and say with full faith in all that it means, L'shana tova umituka, to a year of sweet goodness.